Thanks so much for joining us. It's an election year, as you might have noticed, and that means voting and the ballot questions and the candidates are front and center. And here to talk about the elections in Massachusetts this year and broader voting trends is the Secretary of State of the Commonwealth, William Galvin. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you here. How are the two parties doing? We were chatting before. You mentioned that party enrollment, Democrat and Republican, continues to slip. Independent or unenrolled continues to grow.
That's correct.
Why? What's going on? Give me your take on both parties.
There's been a long-term trend, quite much throughout the nation, actually, about people perceiving the parties as not to be particularly representative of their political addresses, if you will. There's been intensification in terms of the ideological sides of both parties. That tends to reinforce more people not being a participant in either one. And then I think here in Massachusetts, we've had a very positive opportunity for people who are not party enrollees to still vote in party primaries when they choose to. That's an option they have. So that means there's no penalty if you're a party. If you're an independent, you're not prevented from participating, as they are in some states. So that's part of it. I think there's been a gradual trend over many decades as people have relocated and migrated within the state to oftentimes not choose to be a party member particularly. And I think there's been other recent factors. Automatic voter registration has default registration as independent. That's a small factor. But I think all of those things have combined to gradually reduce the party enrollments.
Now, of course, you're a lifelong Democrat.
Yes.
You haven't been shy in the past about expressing your opinion about the direction of the party. What do you make of the way it's headed these days?
Well, I think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party both have, it's manifest all the time, significant internal discussions about policy, and various groups within both parties have strong opinions about policy. We just saw a New York State primary for congressional races where these fault lines were very much on display. Obviously, on the Republican side, I guess pick your poison, if you will. If you want a lockstep party that ideologically seems to be out of touch with many people, they seem to be going that direction. Many moderate Republicans are somewhat alienated by some of their views as well. So, I mean, that's the problem that parties traditionally have, is they want to be the big tent, but oftentimes they're a very small booth.
Well, well said. In the presidential race, the Biden campaign is certainly trying to, and polls show somewhat succeeding, in making the state and future of our democracy a big issue for voters. Are you worried about that?
Well, I'm surely worried about it. I mean, as the chief election official of Massachusetts, not only that, but I'm the senior election official in the United States at the present time. And I've talked to my colleagues in other states, both Democrats and Republicans, and many of us share the same concerns, that we have citizens who are distrustful of the process. We have anxiety about the accuracy of the process, none of which are factually justified. But nevertheless, it's contributing to an unease in our democracy that we're very concerned. And there's no ignoring the realities of January 6th of 2021. There's just no ignoring it. We have to get beyond that. We have to make sure that the laws are clear, which I think the Congress has done something positive there in that regard regarding presidential elections. And we have to have transparency in the election process at every level to make people confident of it. I think in Massachusetts, we've had a very good record of that. I've only allowed paper ballots. We've only had that. Voters actually put the ballot into the box themselves. We have very easy recount laws. If people really want to check on a number, they're able to do that, and it's done all the time at the municipal level. So, but I think all of these things contribute to building public confidence in the electoral process.
Welcome back to our conversation with Secretary of State Bill Galvin. And Mr. Secretary, the ballot questions are probably the highlight of the election here in Massachusetts. Yes, there's a Senate race. We'll see how competitive that turns out to be. As we're sitting here right now, what are we going to be seeing as far as the ballot questions go?
Well, we could, now that the Supreme Court has ruled on several of the cases that were brought, it looks like we'll have 5 potential topics before voters. We'll have a corporate effort by Uber, Lyft to protect their method of ride sharing. We'll have an effort by the employees of Uber, Lyft to permit unionization.
Two separate questions.
Two separate questions. We'll have a question on psychedelic drugs, magic mushrooms, AKA. We'll have a proposal from the Teachers Association to eliminate the MCAS test. We will have a proposal from some other unions to allow for a minimum wage for tipped workers. And
then the
we'll have
auditor's
the auditor's
question,
question on auditing the legislature.
This whole process of sort of government by referendum, how would you characterize, there's been a lot of alarm expressed about that over the years, perhaps not as much here as in California, where they can have dozens of questions on the ballot. What's a level of what's your perspective on this process?
Well, my perspective is it's a very valuable process. My concern is that it increasingly has become simply a money pit for all of the various interests. And these cases or these questions are decided by the amount of money being spent, and there's a remarkable amount of money being spent every election in Massachusetts on ballot questions. Even from the gathering of signatures to the end-up process of the people voting, it's dominated by money. And so that's of concern. That's certainly not what our constitutional repairers, if you want to call them that introduced this back in 1918, had in mind. They had in mind a safety valve on the legislature, not an opportunity for various special interest groups of all kinds to influence the outcome of public policy by expenditure.
And of course, we just had Auditor DiZoglio here a couple of weeks ago talking about that ballot question, which would give her authority to audit the legislature, which she currently doesn't have. But the bottom line is, even if that passes, and I'm guessing it's likely to pass,
probably,
the legislature can turn around and repeal it, correct?
Well, I think the bigger question that she's going to confront, and I've discussed this with the auditor, is the constitutional restrictions on the various sections of our government, the branches of our government, and that's where she's going to probably have her challenge as things go forward. I'm assuming that it will pass. I think it seems very popular, and I think after it passes, the enforcement is going to be the challenge.
Well, we're just about out of time, but just to put a period on it, you've been at this a long time. I won't say how long, out of courtesy, but a long time. Are you as confident in the health of our democracy as you were when you started, less so or more so?
I'm confident in people's interest in making sure democracy is protected. I'm concerned about the twists and turns that many recent developments, such as social media, misinformation, AI, all these things that we've seen develop, the effect it can have, and the reluctance of people to accept an election result. That's the concern. As Americans, we should join in accepting the concept that we all vote, we always don't win, but we all have to agree that the elections, provided they're properly run, should be accommodated and approved as a result.
Thank you for being here. Please come again.
I will be back, I'm sure.
Secretary of State Bill Galvin.